holds a double PhD from Florida International University and Universidad Complutense de Madrid. He's an assistant professor educator in Spanish at the University of Cincinnati. He's especially interested in the role of the learner's identity in the process of second language acquisition, as well as in the impact of the incorporation of diversity in the language curriculum. He didn't add this information to his bio, but well, he's also a published author. I have here his book, and well, I'm gonna then let him speak. Thank you, Juan, for being here with us.
Thank you, Alberto. Actually, let me share. Well, no, I cannot share my screen, Gillian. I think I'm not co-host right now. Okay, I think now I can.
There you are. Yeah, you have access now.
Okay, give me a second. Okay, everybody can see my screen at this moment? Okay, great. So first of all, I want to thank you, Cyber, LAX, the Cuban Research Institute, Department of Modern Language, and of course to Alberto for inviting me here. It is a pleasure actually to come back to my alma mater. It's been already, I mean, it hasn't been that long. I left FIU 2000, well, the building in 2017, actually, although I graduated in 2019, but the last year and a half, I was crazy and I went to China. So thank you for inviting me. I'm going to talk today about promoting more inclusive and authentic realities in Spanish for Business language classroom. Please feel free to interrupt me at any time if you have any question, any doubt. I don't pretend that to be just like a lecture, just we can have a conversation about a different topic. If you have any question, we don't need to wait for the end. You can write your question in the chat if you don't feel comfortable speaking, and I'm sure that Alberto or somebody else can interrupt me and we can try to answer the question before we get to the end. Okay, so I don't know if any of you have taught Spanish for business before, or any of those language for specific purposes before. Has any of you?
I was going to say, I think Alberto has.
Alberto, teach?
Both is, I'm sorry, Spanish for business and Spanish for business in Latin America.
Okay, the same as I thought. And I see also someone else, I see a hand. Which one did you teach? I don't see your name, but I see somebody with a camera that raised his hand. Yes, but you're mute, so I can.
Oh, we have James. Yeah.
Oh, Spanish for business.
Spanish for business. Okay. Somebody else. Did any of you have any expertise in business when you came to teach those classes?
I sold broccoli in Cuba.
Okay, I guess that's
broccoli in Cuba.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I also taught Spanish for business and business in Latin America, and as Alberto did, I also did it at FIU. In my case, I did it when I was in China. And the first time I had to teach those courses, I said, what the hell I'm doing here when I started to do a PhD in literature and I never wanted to do anything with business. What I'm doing that? So this is probably a concern or an issue, a challenge many of us face when we come to teach these courses, and something that we are also going to discuss today. So the presentation has 4 parts. At the beginning, we are going to do a brief review of the literature for language for specific purposes. So we are going to try to understand what are those courses and what are the key elements. Then we are going to identify a problem or an issue that I find really concerning when we come to language for specific purposes, and it has to do with authentic text and the sense of community in those classrooms. Obviously, if we identify a problem, it is also nice to try to propose something to try to fix, and I say try because I'm not sure it is so easy to fix, and then also to provide some resources for that. And at the end, I will invite you to reflect on the importance of this issue. So without delaying more representation, I'm going to start. What do you understand when we speak about language for specific purposes? If for those of you who has never taught those classes before, and if you heard of LSP courses, what are those? Can someone tell me something? What do they think?
I'm assuming that because I have never taught that, I'm a historian and a Latin Americanist, that the technical words you will use will be specific to whatever field you're addressing. If you're talking about technology, you will use a lot of technological words. If you're talking about business, you will do the same. So it is a very specific, as the title says, kind of vocabulary that you're going to use and build during the semester or during the class.
Okay, so you have pay attention to one of the probably the aspect of this course of these courses that have received more attention by the critics or by the instructor, which is the vocabulary. But it goes beyond the vocabulary. But it is true that the most recurring thinking when we talk about language for specific purposes, which vocabulary do I need to talk about business, or do I need to talk about nursing, or do I need to talk about journalism? Okay, so when we talk about language for specific purposes, it is an approach to language teaching based on the learner's need to participate effectively in the target academic or professional community. And I'm highlighting the target or academic or professional community because later we're going to discuss which is that community and whether we can talk about one community or different communities or the different members and different entities that are part of that community. So the first time that there was a serious review of language for specific purposes was in 1991. Actually, Gross, one of the authors, was at that moment a professor at FIU in the College of Education. And Gross and Bode highlighted the key elements of LSP courses. The first element they highlighted is the context. As also Leonardo highlighted, these courses are focused on a specific field. So what we need to talk about business. So it is important also to use text, situations, and methodology drawn from those disciplines. Obviously, if we want to talk about context on a specific field, it is important also to use authentic materials. Why? Because those authentic materials are going to help a student to get familiar with the situations and where they're going to be hopefully using the language. And also at the same time, the use of these authentic materials are going to create opportunities to give a meaningful learning process for students and therefore to foster their motivation when studying a second language. However, in order to foster these motivations and to choose the right authentic materials, it is important to pay attention to the learner's need. And this is normally an issue when we talk about language for specific purposes, because we could talk about learners' need in many different areas. and especially when those areas combines with the different fields within the use of the language. For example, Hugo Bors talks about the need to analyze corpus-based lexicons, as Leonardo was mentioning, but also to talk about genre analysis that are specific to the fields, about the ethnographies of this field, and all those kind of research is not really happening that much, and we are going to also discuss in a little bit why this is not happening. Another element that Gross and Ball highlights is the LSP teacher profile. As I said, many of us who teach these classes are not experts in Spanish for Business curriculum, and because also the lack of research, we have to become teachers. We have also to be material providers. We also have to be researchers. We have to be collaborators when we come to talk about colleagues from other disciplines or members of the community. And also we need to be evaluators. The other key element that Gross and Bolt and highlight is that it is important to pay attention to the cross-cultural dimensions of the communication that happens between the students' culture and the culture where they are trying to enter. At that moment in 1991, he was talking about cross-cultural dimensions. Normally, probably today, we will be talking about intercultural competence, and some researchers even talk about transcultural competence, which I rather actually use intercultural competence. But these terms refers to the dynamic that process between the settings of the classroom teaching and the students' background. And something, that article was in 1991, but then in 2012, they updated the research to see how the field had evolved. And one of the issues is that it hadn't evolved that much, but something that they added was the important role of technology, which has been extremely important when we talk about LSP, because there is a lot of research about computer-based learning and the recreation of situational practice for this kind of courses. So from those key elements, it is very clear that LSP courses must be rooted in the text and practices of the target discipline. And here I provided some examples. So we can talk about the descriptions of the functions of a product. We can also talk about providing instruction to a nurse in a surgery. We can also talk about calling a courthouse to inquire about a hearing or editing a new article. And for those of you who are not very related to pedagogies, those different key elements are actually very connected to what we call task-based language teaching, because as many of you already know, task-based language teaching is focused on real-world tasks and authentic materials. And though I'm not going to focus right now on task-based language teaching, it's something that we can discuss at the end if you have any questions, or feel free to email me later. So when we talk about LSP, there are like 7 different categories. The first one is vocabularies and glossaries. That is the one that Leonardo first mentioned. But then we also talk about career education and how these courses help our students to be or to get better jobs later when they go to the job market. We also talk about curriculum development and where do we place those courses in our department. There is a lot of controversy whether these courses should be in business department, should be in the nursing department, or they should be in language department. Actually, nowadays, it is very frequent to find those courses in language and literature departments. And we are going also to discuss the implication that this is having on the field. Also, there is research about the proficiency, because although at this moment the ACFEL, for example, has provided clear proficiency guidelines when we talk about general language acquisition, there are not so clear proficiency guidelines when we talk about language for specific purposes. And other research area is methods and materials. And obviously, when we talk about materials, we talk about authentic materials. And this is actually one of the key elements I'm more interested in, and I'm going to talk about it today. And the last one is discourse analysis. So from those 7, I highlighted 3 of them who are actually very connected, which are curriculum development, integration of language and culture, and methods and materials. So in the field of curriculum development, aside where to place those courses, there has been a lot of conversations about how to adapt these courses to learners' needs, and the use of culturally and linguistically rich, authentic materials. But I can say that though we are today, 2021, actually, we can find that those materials are linguistically rich, they are not so rich culturally. And even though the research was in 1991, so that was already 30 years ago, this is right. There hasn't been so much improved in terms of cultural use of this text. Then when we talk about integration of language and culture, we also realize there is a very little coverage. And this is even more surprising if we think about how second language acquisition theory has evolved in the last 20, 30 years. There is a lot of focus on the connection between language and culture in regular language classrooms. We see every year the MLA, all international conference, the AATSP, doing a lot of research about how to integrate language and culture in our classroom. However, when it comes to LSP, and specifically in this case for business for Spanish culture, there is no such a thing, or not that much. Actually, on the bottom, I have put the name of some researchers that have talked about it, and actually the last one, Rupert Davila, has focused on Spanish for business. In the case of Douglas, he does research on French. Herulatis, I think, is in German. So there is not even that much research on the use of language and culture in a Spanish business classroom. And then in the case of methods and materials, we also see these 2 articles, which are probably very important, even if, as we can see, they are 1984, so it's actually very old. And we are going to focus actually in a version that Gross wrote after 1984, which happened in 1992. At that moment, she wrote an article, that she named The Cultural Content of Business Spanish Text. And the article wanted to research on the most frequent textbooks used in this classroom. And in order to analyze these textbooks, she presented these different questions. So how much culture is taught in the business Spanish course? Which aspects of culture are treated, and with what methods? What cultural topics and themes commonly appear in the text? How is the cultural information presented? What activities and techniques are used to promote cultural understanding? And to what extent do the texts incorporate authentic materials? And for those of you who have already taught these kind of courses, I invite you also to think about these questions, applying them to the textbooks that you have used or you use. And this doesn't tend to be a critique, but just a reflection of what we are doing. So to be aware of what is happening in the business language classroom. So when Gross tried to answer this question, paying attention to the different textbooks, she found that the majority of the authentic material that were used in these textbooks are very generic and only contain little or no cultural information. And whenever they do, it just certain patterns of everyday life, business, correspondent culture, or some aspects of economic culture. So at that moment, they gave some recommendations, which we can see, for example, expand the treatment of cultural topics, including both patterns of everyday living and economic culture, consult business Spanish students about their interest in culture, make extensive use of authentic materials, incorporate learning activities that promote cross-cultural understanding and critical thinking, encourage students to interact with native speakers, and use a variety of teaching techniques. And even though these recommendations are from 1992, they're still very valid today because we are still facing the same issues or very similar issues. So when we talk about LSP, what are the challenges we face? The first challenge we face is the imprecise LSP nomenclature. There has been a lot of discussion whether we should be talking about LSP, or for example, in the case of business, we should be talking about business language studies, because it allows a more theory-based field of a scholarship, which will help to give a place to this field. But then there are also some authors that have concerns about the boundaries when defining this term, because it will have some implication for assessment. There has been also some opposition about the importance of LSP courses, especially because, as I already mentioned, they are normally part of departments of language and literature courses, and sometimes there are faculty, normally literature and linguistic faculty, that do not recognize LSP courses as legitimate academic interdisciplines, sometimes because they may be afraid of losing enrollment. And this also has an impact on the research, because sometimes there are some junior faculty who want to do research on LSP, but they are afraid that this research is not going to be considered enough when they apply for the tenure track review. So they decide not to really do that much research on those fields. Also, it is, as probably many of us who does language and literature are not expert in business or nursing, it requires interdisciplinary cooperations. However, this interdisciplinary cooperation requires a lot of time and work, and in most of the cases, there is no sufficient reward structure for this kind of work. Also, another challenge is how to engage students with the community. And there has been some research that prove there is some trust issues between communities and local business that has an impact on how to involve students with local business. Obviously, that also requires a lot of time. Another issue we talk, and probably we are all used to talk about lack of resources, because this is an issue always when we talk about humanities. But actually, when we talk about funding cuts, one of the first fields that receive those cuts are LSP courses. Sometimes also there is lack of faculty and instructor, and this is very connected to the next topic, because normally those courses are taught by adjuncts or by TAs, which doesn't mean they are not good, but it means that they are not normally well trained, or they don't have the time, or they are not compensated to develop these courses as deep as they should be. When I was teaching, for example, these two courses, I was teaching at the same time 5 courses. So you can imagine teaching 5 courses. I wish I would have had more time to fully develop these courses, but I didn't have, And actually, this is an issue that academy needs to talk about. Also, one of the issues we find is how to assess those courses. As I mentioned before, there is a trend to use the same assessment that we use in traditional language courses, but we cannot use the same assessment to assess traditional language courses if we are talking in a different specific field. So there is a lot of controversial about which assessments to use. Also, there is some challenge in terms of research, especially because most of the research that is done on LSP is done in English, and that is a lack of communication between the practitioners, those of us who teach those courses, and the researchers. And that also has an impact on the difficulty to really apply the results of the research to the practice. So there is like a disconnection between research or theory and practice. And the last challenge we find when we talk about LSP is the lack of training of technology on behalf of many instructors. So what is the main problem or issue that I want to talk today when we talk about business for Spanish classrooms? Is the role of authentic materials or authentic text. When we talk about authentic text in second language acquisition, we don't understand text in the traditional meaning of like something that is written. No, we understand text such as like a cultural production. It can be a text, I mean a traditional text, or it can be a painting, it can be a movie, it can be an ad, it can be a trailer, it can be a sign on the street, it can be anything, okay? Any. However, texts are not created on their own. They need someone to produce them. So it is important we pay attention to who produce those texts, to whom do they talk, which communities are they representing, which situational practice and context are they bringing into the classroom. Are those authentic texts promoting reflections and discussions that include the cultural practices that involve the multiple entities that are part of the targeted community? And that probably also invites us to rethink what we understand by culture. Or if we can even talk about one culture, or to whom does this culture belong? Okay, and it is important we pay attention to three other concepts, which are cultural practices, cultural products, and cultural perspectives. So those are three terms that everybody, or well, not everybody, but most of us who do research on the integration of language and culture, we tend to pay attention to, because we understand products as any tangible or intangible creations of a particular culture. For example, if we talk about tangible creations, we can talk something like, I don't know, the clothes or the food or whatever that you can actually touch. However, when we talk about intangible, we can talk about traditions, or we can talk about short stories, or we can talk about myths or anything. Then when we talk about practices, we need to think about the patterns of social interactions or behaviors, the knowledge of what to do, when, and where. So if we are going to talk about business, how do you say hi to your partner? Where do you close your business, your agreement? Where do you sign your contract? Whatever, okay? And then the perspective can be assumed as like the philosophical meanings, attitudes, values, or beliefs that underline the cultural practice and product of a society. So when we try to answer those questions, keeping in mind the different concepts, and this is my dog trying to play. when we try to answer these questions, pay attention to these terms, and we look at the textbooks that are more frequently used in the US. And I don't know if any of you have used this book before. If you have if you have done it, don't feel this is an offense. I mean, there's not really another way to use textbook because those are the only one that are in the market. But probably it is also the one that is more used is the one on the right, Éxito Comercial, which is by Cengage. As you can see, my dog is coming here. Leo, that's it. And there is a research on this list, on this last textbook, which paid attention to the use of culture. Yeah. Okay. So as you see, Houston did research on Éxito Comercial, which is the name of the textbook, and although he found a lot of variety of approaches and such topics focused on the issue like office equipment, international business, cultural consideration. He found there was an emphasis on proficiency rather than on content. And if you see on the right, you are going to find the names of the different chapters of the textbook. There is not even one reference to any Hispanic country. So I was wondering how are we going to talk about business for in Spanish if there is no reference to the countries? Like, how are we teaching like business for everybody? Is the same? We do business the same way in Mexico than we do in Nigeria? Do we do business the same way in Puerto Rico than we do in Thailand? Definitely no. Okay, so what do we do now? So we are not talking about culture in Spanish for Business classroom, or not as much as we should. So what do we do? Leo, I cannot believe it. Okay, so when we talk about what do we do, it is important we pay attention to Nelson. Nelson talked about two types of pedagogy of inclusion and pedagogy of inquiry. Actually, Nelson is not, she is very critic with the pedagogy of inclusion because she refers that whenever we talk about including somebody else or some topics, we are also at the same time excluding somebody else. So she's always very concerned, and although she thinks that it is not, or she doesn't agree that we should be using that pedagogy, I think we do. Because whenever it's always if we are talking about widening or opening the broad of communities we are bringing to the classroom, this is something always positive, even if sometimes we cannot represent everybody who is part of the community. But she's more focused on the pedagogy of inquiry. The pedagogy of the inquiry is invite us to research and to think about the linguistic and cultural practice that naturalize only some kind of identities. And I'm paying attention to identities because all those texts are produced by people who have some specific identities, and their identities have an impact on the way they use the language and on the way they produce the text, on the way they make businesses. So we cannot understand business without understanding who produce business and who makes businesses. And who makes them is who we are. And this is really connected to who we are as human beings. So we could talk about diversity and inclusions in that sense. So what Nelson proposed is like to move from learning about or learning to accept a concept to analyze how language and culture work together. And in that case, how they work together when we talk about business. Now I'm going to show an ad that has been very popular in the Dominican Republic. Okay, so in this, when we see that ad, I want you to think on these 4 questions you have on the right. So which values does he highlight from Dominicans? Which feelings or emotion do you think they want to provoke to the audience? How do you think, how do you think, who do you think is the targeted audience? And what is this ad telling us about the image of Dominicans? Okay, so let me show the ad. Hopefully it works.
Ser dominicano hoy es ser protagonista.
Protagonista soy de mi destino, yo soy el responsable. Soy quien decide qué quiere y qué hace. Tengo en mis manos poder y un tesoro. ¡Plátano power! Llevo las riendas del timón y el volante. Siento que nada detiene mi avance. Hoy ya no espero, es mi decisión.
Yo, mujer valiente soy, momento de hacer algo grande y gigante. De nuestra vida somos comandantes, siempre mejores que antes. Yo, verde la tierra, fría la fría, caliente el corazón que brinda alegría. La gente más linda es la mía, y si reencarno, no sería.
Hoy, si lo queremos, llegamos a Marte. Hay 10 millones sintiéndose parecer.
Arriba ese orgullo, arriba esa voz. Arriba presidente, celebremos lo que somos.
Okay, so this is the ad that Via Presidente did, I believe, it was last year probably, 2019, I believe. So I don't know what you think, but when I saw the ad, I wanted to drink beer even if I don't like it. So which values does he highlight from Dominicans? What do you think? What is telling us about the Dominicans?
The first impressions after watching that, you see the diversity. You see also certain settings, like when I saw the salons, for example, and what kind of treatments people are getting. It reminds me of this current movement in the Dominican Republic to celebrate natural hair. So I saw that, and then you can appreciate certain cultural figures. I saw Meli Quesada in there. But I think it's speaking to a sort of agency and a bit more diversity than we're used to seeing in highlighting Dominican culture. It tends to sometimes downplay its diversity.
Okay. Any other comments?
I think it's and again, the anthropologist, the me is coming out. I think it's actually propagating the stereotypes of the Dominicans. Dominicans party, Dominicans drink. It's all about, very specific stereotypes that we have perpetuated, particularly in the US. And again, it's something that has been probably produced in the US. And that's something that again, I'm glad that you're bringing all these issues, like I said in the chat, of culture and understanding culture and because it is something different. The Dominican culture on the island, as it is on the island, and the Dominican culture as we perceive from the United States, from the business perspective of the United States. So it's good. It's both. It has good aspects like diversity, but also it just perpetuates the stereotypes about the Dominican.
I agree, and I actually going to focus on Luciana. Yes, sorry, I saw your hand.
Hello. I also observe the community engagement, that they go in a boat, but all together. They dance, but not alone. They go to buy in a grocery shop, but with their family or friends, and the life in the streets, that they are there doing whatever, drinking or not, but they use the streets, and also in a cheerful way. They are all smiling and dancing. And it can be an stereotype, but it's also true. No matter this, despite the circumstances, we can, in all Latin America and some also in Spain, we can observe a cheerful way of life, no matter what.
I agree, but if, for example, we pay attention to a little bit like deeper analysis of the ad, we can see that whenever there is a close capture of someone, that person is normally very cute. So he has like a very sexy, normally a very sexy person. So it also tried to reinforce some kind of this stereotype or the fetishization of the body that we can find in the Caribbean. And at the same time, yesterday, Professor Duani was talking about the whitening in the Dominican Republic. Yes, we talk about, we see a lot of diversity, but where are the dark Dominicans? I haven't seen any dark Dominican in the ad, at least not in a closed caption. So yes, that is a lot of diversity, but we also need to think about how the concept of, for example, in the case race, is working in the Dominican Republic. Professor Duani talked yesterday about how the dark Dominicans or how they don't identify themselves as dark because they are for the Haitians and all these dynamics. But all those cultural concepts have an impact when we are, for example, developing an ad. So how we can be talking about marketing an ad in a Spanish for Business classroom if we don't take into consideration all those aspects? We are not going, if we have an American student who is going to work for a Dominican business company, and that person doesn't know about the concept of race in the Dominican Republic, which kind of ad that person is going to develop. So is that ad is going to be successful? Probably no, because it's not understanding what it is behind the culture of those people. Another example, for example, it comes when we talk about hiring of human resources. And if we bring somebody from the US to work in a human resources department, and they don't know anything about the laws that protects indigenous community and Afro-descendants in order to avoid the discrimination that many of them suffer in the different countries, how are they going to be able to develop their work in human resources without being aware of the challenge those communities face when they try to find a job? And I just provided some of the laws that we can find here. So Duke said need to be brought into the Spanish for Business classroom because this is part of the culture and this has an impact on what is happening in the classroom. And I know we don't have much time, so I'm going to go very fast. So we also can talk about the gender inequalities that we can see in Latin America between women and men when they try to get higher positions or executive positions, and the different amounts of salaries they get. Or for example, if we talk about banking, I don't know if any of you know this documentary that is in Netflix, and I definitely recommend it. Is Living on $1, and those are like 4 students who moved like for 2 months to one indigenous community in Guatemala, and they try to understand, and they talk about how these communities cannot access to credit whenever they want to open a business because the kind of documents that the bank is asking them, they don't have it, and how they have to create alternative banking systems. How are we going to talk about business in Guatemala if we don't talk about the way that indigenous communities have access to banking or to credit? Then there is no such a thing. I mean, we're talking about business, yes, but not for the Spanish communities, definitely, or not for Hispanic communities. Okay, so why it is important for us to talk about that? First of all, because when we ask a student to study another language, in this case, a language focused on a specific field, we are asking also to study another culture. And therefore, we are asking them to enter into a community that is not their own, to make sense of new experience and to build relationships. Also, a student cannot effectively engage with communities about which they learn without also understanding the social, historical, economical, and political backgrounds. And also, as Dr. Anja says, learning a new language is a transformative socialization, which is how learners, instructors, and the communities enact new communities as they collaboratively construct and negotiate multiple identities. So I know it's the time, we are 1 minute late. I don't know if we have time, Alberto, for some questions, some doubts, some comments. I know the next session with Deborah starts at 10 a.m. So you have any question, any doubt, I'm free to answer some of them now, or if you want, you can also email me later.
I think that we can proceed and have at least a round of questions, because we designed the program with 15 minutes of recess. So I think that we can use some of that time for questions.
Okay.
Questions, comments?
I have a question.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Woloy, for your presentation. I teach at an HBCU, Morehouse College, and there's a lot of interest in developing a Spanish for Business course. We also have the piloting of an online business degree soon to start in the fall. And my question is, what research are you aware of in terms of how do you target that academic community that has that interest from that HBCU perspective, for example, or from that African diaspora, in terms of business practices in Latin America, and really engaging students to see not only the value of Spanish and its connection to the African diaspora in Latin America, but also within the US, being a nation where the second most spoken language is Spanish.
Well, right now, there is an important trend on research about students' identity and second language acquisition. We can see a lot of research dealing with race and second language learning. For example, if you read Dr. Uju Anja, if you go to read Margarita Johnson, Randall Jr., I can send you some reference later. But the issue is all those research are focused mainly are focused on general language courses. This research is not being transferred to LSP courses. So this is a work that needs to be done. Right now, there is no a transfer between the research that is happening in traditional language classes, trying to be more diverse, more inclusive, not only about race, gender, sexual identity, everywhere. Even we talk about beauty and how we understand beauty, or if we talk about fetishization of the body, if we talk about disabilities, anyway. So there is a lot of research happening in the general language classes, but not in the LSP. So we all can accept like an invitation to try to bring this research to LSP courses. This is something that we still need to do, and it is not been done, at least not that I know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You had also a question. I saw your hand or comment.
Luciana?
Oh, yes. I like very much your presentation, Juan, and it's very useful for all of us. Nowadays, I'm planning the course for Honduras together in the COIL modality, and we are working together, the other professor and me, to work about the potential of some type of enterprises, because they don't exist already, and the economic and political situation is changing, and it's also difficult. And to tell students, no matter that this enterprise doesn't exist, it can exist because it has this and this and this potential, and the political changing scheme is included. No, we know that this is the situation. We know the hardship of the internet connection, of the daily life, of food restrictions, but we also have this and this, that is microcredit options or international agreements, or in this case, the agreement with FIU, it's also helping them to feel they have something else after their own universities in Honduras. No? And that teaching Latin America is also adapting to those changes before they can even happen, because sometimes we're talking about a scenario that changes day after. So I think it's very good to keep in mind all the concepts you gave us and try to adapt to the communities, and if it is for the states also, to take into consideration the origin of our students, because maybe they experience in other countries other aspects that they bring into the way they do business here, no? I imagine it is this way.
Absolutely.
So there is any other question? Medardo?
Hey, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Maybe you touch on this, but I was wondering, considering that the Spanish variations through the Caribbean are so influenced by African languages, and more than that, usually when in the spectra of variants of Spanish, usually in the US, the focus is Spanish from the peninsula or Spanish from Mexico. And I'm curious if you can talk about how teaching students on how integrate diversity, how you consider the linguistic discrimination of certain variations of Spanish that are very influenced by the African substract into the whole scope of the lessons. Yeah.
This is something that has to do when we were also talking about which authentic materials we use, because we need to pay attention to who produce those authentic materials. If we bring materials that are normally produced by people of white who normally use a standard language that are normally more similar to the language standard from Spain, obviously we are not going to prepare our students to talk to all those other communities. So that's why it is important the choice we do when we choose the materials we bring into the classroom, because it's not only about the materials, it's not about who we are bringing into our classroom. So it is very important that when we choose the materials, we also choose to bring linguistic representation from the different communities. For example, I don't know if we are going to talk about Guatemala, why we're not going to talk about Garifuna communities, and why I'm not going to bring the language that the Garifuna communities use. Right now, there is a lot of research about linguistic diversity in the language classroom, but there is still also a lot of pushback from the community when we talk about linguistic diversity, because some people think like, well, this is beginners or intermediates, they can barely use present tense, how I'm going to present them with a variation or with other concept. And I will say why it is important for them to learn, for example, with like, I don't know, to learn to use to and not to learn to use both. I mean, just a silly case. Or why we don't show them, because normally in that case, the Caribbean dialect is not normally represented in many of the language classroom we bring. Actually, I mean, as you know, the Caribbean dialect is more connected to the Andalus dialect from Spain in some ways. I've been told many times, because I'm from Andalusia, that how I was going to teach Spanish if I didn't even speak Spanish. But I think the point is to choose which tests and which communities or who produce those texts, and to talk and to analyze from a linguistically point of view those texts. We need to.
My question comes from because when you talk about business, it's this implicit idea of what's professional, what's considered to be professional in certain environments, and it's very interesting. I'm really curious, and I find very interesting the constant I don't know request for people in the Caribbean to start to speak slower or to pronounce all the syllables because they have to be closer to certain standard of Spanish that will translate as being educated or being more professional. And all of the frequently we dismissed people that because of the way that they talk, they are deemed not educated, or and in many cases that's correlated with race.
We are talking about perspectives and how those image or those beliefs tell us about the culture and the way the dynamics of power work in the community. So that's why it is important to pay attention to all these kinds of dynamics, but this is not happening at all.
Yeah.
Well, it's not happening in normal language classroom, but not even less in LSP classroom. But I mean, if someone can bring me an example that this is happening, I will pay them because I will be very happy. But okay, Deborah, so don't make me poorer, please. So well, if you are doing it, Deborah, it doesn't count because I know you do it. So that doesn't help. But tell me, Deborah.
Thank you. Fascinating.
Thank you.
No, I don't want to add anything. Absolutely. My presentation is going to be in a few minutes. Yeah. But we both know that it's happening in our classrooms.
Well, yes, but because
I'm assuming in Denise Calleja's classroom as well, because she's working in HBCU. So
I was going to add an example in terms of negotiating these cultural perspectives. This actually happened in my Portuguese class. We had a section on interviews, you know, and employment vocabulary, finding jobs. So it didn't happen in an LSP class, but it happened in the language class. And one of my students remarked on one of the sample, I forgot what the term is in English, I'm sorry. One of the sample requirements for the interview and for the job was boa apresentação. So, you know, buena presentación, a good, you know, physical presentation. And then also the noticing of including your photograph in many of your CVs. And so a whole discussion surfaced on what is boa apresentação, right? And one of my Afro-Brazilian students was mentioning, well, you know, that's an avenue for discrimination. A lot of times that is the first, you know, level of eliminating you from even being considered for the job. And the immense pressure, going back to the Dominican Republic example of straightening your hair, even for your driver's license, you know, that some people have been turned away for saying, oh, you don't look presentable. And so I think these things would be very valuable in an LSP course dedicated to business, whereby we talk about that form of cultural perspectives and how we negotiate that and how we address the sensibility of that.
And we talk about business classroom, but we could talk about any other LSP classroom. If I think about medicine in Spain, I don't think many people in Spain, and that's my opinion, I don't want to offend anybody, will feel very comfortable having a black doctor, for example. And I'm not sure if they will let that person help them. So that's also something that we need to talk about. Leonardo, and I know we don't have much time.
No, I just wanted to add that I'm a huge proponent of multiculturalism in the language, in the classroom, and everything. But we also have to be careful, and we have to approach the language understanding the variations that might be offensive to the others. For example, you need to understand that coger, while in the Caribbean is fine, in Mexico is not. Or acabar, and I'm being very honest, you know, in Cuba or in other countries it's okay, but in Venezuela it's not. And so we have to be aware of that as the same way we have to be aware of our history and our cultural similarities and differences. The language for business has to be kind of neutral, if there is such a thing as a neutral kind of Spanish, because we have too many variations of the same.
I'm not sure if it needs to be neutral or it needs to be specific for every country or every context. I think we need to be talking about when to use it, not about to look for a neutral use, but to explain the context when they can use some terms and when they cannot. And I know we don't have much time, right? Because I know Deborah is waiting and I don't want to delay her presentation. So please feel free to email me. You have any question, any comments, I'm happy to discuss, to collaborate, whatever you want. Thank you so much for all of you.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you for this amazing presentation. Wow. I think that we will continue this discussion now with Deborah's talk. So I'm going to introduce Deborah really quick. Well, Dr. Deborah Gomez is assistant professor of Spanish at Florida Memorial University. She obtained her PhD in Spanish from Florida International University with a concentration in both Latin America and peninsular literature and culture. Her research encompasses Cuban studies in Latin American and Caribbean literature and film. She applies interdisciplinary approaches and methods to the field of literature, history, culture, and film, and other visual arts. From a pedagogical standpoint, Dr. Gomez researches Spanish second, foreign, and heritage language acquisition, thus based language teaching and diversity in the language classroom. Welcome, Deborah, and go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Cyber and LAC, and of course, Alberto, for inviting me. Let me just share my screen. Give me a second. Share screen. Host disable participant screen sharing. So the host will need to allow me to share the screen.
Let me give you access now. Hold on one moment. Sorry about that. Okay, you have access now. Thank you.
Okay, let's try again. Oh. Sorry. This is a new computer. I never shared the screen on this computer. So if someone can help me, it says that I need to go to, give me a second. To system preference.
You should have a green button in the middle that says share screen.
I already did that, and I click on desktop and share, and now it's telling me open system preference, security, privacy to grant access.
Oh, it's a new computer, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Also, if you'd like, you can send us your presentation and we can share it. And you can just let us know when to go to the next slide.
Oh, okay.
Either way, whichever you prefer.
No, I guess, yes. I will share, I will email you the presentation. Or if we can take a couple of minutes, I could get ready, but since we didn't take a break, but whatever you prefer. So which email should I send the presentation?
Yeah, you could send it to, hold on one moment. I just wrote it in the chat. Okay, I'm just opening my Outlook now. All right, it's just taking a moment. Did you send it over, Deborah?
Yes, I did.
Oh, you did? Okay. All right, I'm just waiting for it to come. Okay, it hasn't come through yet.
And try if anyone knows from, because I already opened system preference to grant access for Zoom to use my desktop. So if anyone could guide me from there, I just kind of find person, because it says that I need to go to system preference and then to security and privacy, and I did. And then I just don't see what to do right now. It's not locations, I guess, camera.
So it's taking me a while to get it. I don't know if maybe you could, Marcos, is it okay if she sends it to you? Okay, yeah, it's.
Yeah, you can send it to me.
Since I'm recording, it's like not coming in and taking a.
Marcus, I have an iMac. When I go to privacy, security and privacy, because when I try to share the screen, it says that I need to go to system preference and then to go to security and privacy. So I'm already in security and privacy. I just don't know what to do.
Okay, give me a second. Let me take out my computer because I have an iMac too, and let's see if I can guide you through it.
Okay.
Yeah, give me a second.
Sorry, guys.
No problem at all.
I didn't realize this is a new.
No, we all had that happen one time.
If anything, could you please send it to the email I just sent, just in case, and then I can try to share it?
Yeah, because for some reason my Outlook was taking a really long time, and I couldn't hear you and everything, so it might be because I'm recording.
Okay, so it's security and privacy. I think you would have to go to maybe, do you see like a lock at the bottom?
Give me a second. I just sent you the presentation just in case. Security and privacy. Yes, I see a lock.
Okay, click the lock, because if you don't put your password in, then it's not going to let you change anything.
Okay, perfect. I did that.
Okay, let me do that myself. So you don't have anything in the general page, right?
So are we on general or on privacy?
I'm on general right now, but I would try firewall.
Okay.
And then I would try firewall to see if there's anything in the bottom that says allow.
No, it says it's turn on, firewall is on, or firewall off. Right now, firewall is on, and I have the option to just put it off. But I would thought that it might be in privacy, under privacy. I saw Zoom somewhere, but I just didn't. Did you get the presentation otherwise?
I haven't gotten it yet, no.
Okay. Let me see if my other computer, give me just a second.
In the I don't know if you all can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hear me? Okay. In the meantime, I could give a little commercial that we have. If anyone works at an HBCU, MSI, or community college and is interested in receiving cyber funding for maybe, I think Denise mentioned that at Morehouse you were interested in doing a Spanish for Business course. You could apply for cyber funding for that. So I could send an email to everyone with more information on it. And we're gonna open up for that September 1st. So we'd love to have you all apply, as long as it's something that's like business related or languages for business. Okay, Maida, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, Denise, can you send me an email? Because I just had a great idea in the middle of all this technical disaster. I wish was send it to me to watsonm@fiu.edu, because I think we could probably do a joint program in 2022 in Spain. We could co-sponsor our Spanish for Business, a Global Approach program, which we are resuscitating next year in 2022. The last week of June or the first week of July. And so maybe we could just co-sponsor it. Then we would have an HBC and a Hispanic serving institution doing the whole thing together. So thank goodness for the technical disaster. I wouldn't have thought about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maida. That sounds
Okay.
fascinating.
And I may be disappearing and coming back and forth because we have a lot of family issues right now. So, okay, thank you.
Oh, okay. Okay, Jalen's gonna give you access now. No, I haven't gotten anything. Yeah, it's weird.
Okay, give me one moment. It's just taking a moment. Sorry, it's loading. It's not letting me touch anything since I tried to open my email. I don't know what's going on there. Okay, it's not letting, it's completely froze me. It froze me. I don't know if I can.
Yeah, you just. Yeah, the problem was that her computer just froze. Yeah, she's the host. So it's several technical difficulties.
Let me see if I could join from my phone and if I'm still the host there. Sorry, guys. I think I could do it from here. Okay, so Deborah should now have access to be co-host.
Okay, Deborah, maybe you're co-host now.
So you want to talk about race? That will be like another one. Translanguaging and looking like a language and sounding like a race. There is also like an article, but this is the book on racial linguistic ideology. There are other articles and books, but this is one of them. For movies in your classroom, for example, I could recommend Pelo Malo. They talk about race directly. Pelo Malo, Princesas, and activities. If we don't have time, the host will need to tell me, Alberto, if we don't have more time. I can stop here because anyway, Juan Godoy covers the activities part very well. So I could stop here.
Yeah, we're gonna need to stop here, unfortunately.
No, that's fine.
But there is any way you can share at least the activities through email or something like that?
Yes, sure.
I'm gonna leave some time in my presentation because my presentation is it's like a forum, so we can discuss even more because the way this has progressed, it actually fits perfectly in what Juan said, in what Deborah said, and then what I'm going to cover. So it's actually perfect fit.
It was made on purpose, of course.
Claro, claro.
Okay, so then I'm gonna stop here. Thank you so much. And if you have questions, maybe at the end of Leonardo's presentation, we can have both taking questions. I don't know.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Okay.
Okay, a brief introduction of Leo. Dr. Leonardo Falcon came to the US a couple of years ago from his native Cuba as a member of a Catholic religious order and settled in Texas. 6 years later, he received a VA in anthropology from the University of North Texas with a specialization in Cuba and Mayan religious beliefs and practices. In 2002, he received an MA in Latin American and Caribbean Studies for Florida International University in Miami, with a concentration on the social role of the Catholic Church in Cuba during the first half of the 20th century. After years of working as a folklorist for the Florida Department of State and as a park manager for the city of Orlando, he decided to pursue a PhD in history, which he also received from FIU in 2019. His dissertation studies the Inquisition in the Greater Caribbean in the early 17th century. He currently serves as an instructor of history and Latin America studies at Nassau Community College in Long Island, where he also coordinates the Latin American Studies project. So thank you, and go ahead, Leo.
Thank you, Alberto, and thank Jillian and everybody that has organized this. I think is an incredible webinar that we all are benefiting from it. Even if we think that we know it all, we are learning so much. Let me just share my computer. So I can also, okay, whoops, wrong, here, that's what it goes. So can you see it?
Yes, we can see.
All right, so what I'm trying to do with this presentation is cover a little bit of the concepts that we have already covered. I removed a lot of slides because either Duani, Deborah, or Godoy covered it, so I don't want to be repetitive. I will repeat or reiterate some of the concepts like ethnicity and culture because I think they are extremely important to what we are discussing here. And what we're discussing here is basically trying to help or strengthen our students that not necessarily are Latinos, bring them into the Latino world. And when I'm talking about Latino, I'm doing it on purpose because I'm speaking from the North American perspective. In Latin America, we don't use this term, and we all know that. We already covered it. This is an American invention, the same way Latin America is a French invention. So we need to focus that we are working in the United States with students that probably were born in the United States or migrated to the United States, or students that are actually not even Latino. So we need to facilitate the understanding of our culture, of our traditions, or in the case of professors that are not Latinos themselves, they need to make clear the characteristics of those cultures that we call Latin American cultures, particularly, and now it gets even more complicated when we're talking about the Caribbean and the African characteristics of our heritage. And I'm going to address something that Deborah said earlier because it's actually very good. It's a very good transition, and it's that how we are perceived. Because then I'm going to go, as I move into my presentation, I'm going to go into what we really are and how we need to understand ourselves. But the way we are perceived actually models and actually establishes a path on what we can do in the classroom. For example, and I am glad that I have one of my colleagues, or probably more, from Nassau Community College here, because I am at a college that has been traditionally white, very conservative, and my colleague Natalia, who is here, has been trying to introduce Spanish, Latin American studies, and she actually is the chair of the the language immersion program at Nassau. But when I joined a couple of years ago, the idea was to push this Latin American studies, which include the Caribbean. And one of the classes that I was working on is the Afro-Caribbean class. And Deborah, when you mentioned something is really, really interesting. I was basically told by the former chair of that department that I couldn't teach that class because I was not Black. And my question was, how do you know that I am not Black? Because the way, which is what you were saying, the way I look, or because how do you remove the African component from our heritage? How do you remove that African component from the Caribbean people? Like we say, we either in Cuba, we say you have Congo or Carabalí, or we say, ¿y tu abuela dónde está? And it's like, we all have that African traits, and even if it is not biological, it is cultural. And we as professors need to understand this. We need to understand first who we are as individuals. Yes, we are professors, and I'll talk about that in a second, but who are we as individuals? And I always break the ice in my classes, not the eye, but the ice, el hielo, in my classes with something funny. And that's what I'm gonna do here, because I'm gonna fly through the conceptual part of it so we can go into our conversation. But I break the ice with something funny. And let's watch this, because it is a reality from the comedian perspective, but it is actually something that we encountered all the time. So let's see if this works. And you tell me if you can see and hear it. Hopefully nothing ugly or weird will show up.
So we are starting off with SK2's iconic facial treatment essence. This has been a staple.
You can hear it, but not see it.
I don't think I will ever stop using this because of what it's.
Oh my God. Can you see it? No.
No, just hear it.
Okay, so just bear with me for a second, because what it means is that it did not pick up the believe me, we went through this. Hold on. Hold on. I went through this during my classes. I have to share again, so bear with me. Share. Where is it? It's right here. Share the audio. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's funny, but it's true.
We're having fun, you guys. We are here coming to you from South Florida. Heck yeah, man, really close. I gotta ask a question since we're here. I just wanna know, how many Latinos in the crowd tonight? Now, notice I asked Latinos. I wasn't very specific, because if you call a Latino the wrong one, there's an issue. You call a Mexican, a Salvadorian, we get mad. You call a Puerto Rican, a Dominican, they get mad. You call a Cuban anything but a Cuban, you're gonna get stabbed. So for everyone here and everyone at home, I have found a way to figure out who's who. It's very easy. All you have to do is listen to the way the person is speaking Spanish. You don't have to understand a single word, just listen to the flow. That'll let you know. For example, Mexicans, when we speak Spanish, we sound high. Seriously, you ask us a question, we drag it out. Hey bro, how's it going? Pues aquí nomás, hombre. Ah, pues tú sabes, güey. You know, Cubans, I found out Cubans, you guys speak Spanish, like everything means something. It's very serious. You ask a Cuban a question, bro, where you going? Al baño, coño, carajo, why you wanna know? Just asking, dude. It's like, why is he yelling? I don't know. And I found out Puerto Ricans, you guys speak Spanish like there's a time limit. Ask a question, hey bro, what's up? Oh, mírame bro, el otro día estaba con Hicho, me estaba platicando que chacha Benito, yo no sé lo que está pasando aquí nomás. Dame más gasolina. Just fast. Even Mexicans were like, hey, write that down. Quick. Another way is the beverage. The beverage will let you know who you're dealing with. For example, a Mexican's preferred drink of choice is tequila, okay?
So I'm gonna stop this here. Hold on, let me get back to the, again, I do this to break the ice, but also when it is something that is relevant to our discussion, which is language and teaching Latinos. So the first thing I wanna do with, and again, like Deborah and Juan said, you know, if you need to say something or you need clarification, go ahead and ask, because I don't have a problem with interruptions. So the first thing that we need to understand is the concepts, and understand that all of these concepts have been developed by white people. They have been developed by Western society, and then they have been applied to everybody else as sometimes in a very condescending way, or in a way of understanding the other. But when I say that, I also say that this is the society that we live in, and we need to understand these concepts, if not to apply and embrace them completely, to challenge them. So we need to understand that identity from the psychological perspective encompasses the values people hold, which dictate the choices they make. So the values we hold dictate the choices we make. An identity contains many roles, and this is what I was trying to say earlier. So part of your identity could be a mother, a father, a teacher, a citizen, and each role holds meaning and expectations that internalize into one's identity. Identity continues to evolve over the course of an individual's life, meaning that you will acquire more and more traits as you grow or as you develop professionally. Now, that is from the psychological perspective. Since we are talking about cultural, we need to understand what cultural identity is. And cultural, well, first we need to understand culture is the shared characteristics of a group of people which encompasses place of birth, religion, language, cuisine, social behaviors, art, literature, music, and many more aspects. And it is actually self-ascribed. And this is something that we need to understand also, because not everybody from Cuba identifies equally. Not everybody from Mexico identifies him or herself equally. So this is self-ascribed. Many people in the United States, they say, and I'm talking about my own culture, I'm talking about, oh, I'm Cuban, or I'm Cuban/American. And then, like I said yesterday, always add, but my grandparents are from Spain. So it is self-ascribed. Many Mexicans go, say they are Mexican American. People of some people of Mexican descent, particularly in California, will say they are Chicanos. So this is self-ascribed. Not everybody fits in the same category. That's why you will see that a constant in my presentation here is like, do not hold on to stereotypes. Do not generalize, because you can hit the wrong wall. Now, beyond this cultural identity, then you have this migrant identity, which the majority of the students in our classrooms and the majority of us here are migrants. So a migrant's identity is caught between the dilemma of pre-existing cultural markers, the culture that we inherited, the culture that was taught, that we learned at home, which is based on differences of language, religion, and then the modernist approach, which is also what Deborah was trying to say earlier of the modern English, the proper English. So the migrant is faced with a new culture, with the new approach to his or her culture that is embraced in what has been traditionally called the dominant or the mainstream culture. So here you have a very, very confusing starting. What is my culture? How do I describe myself? And then if you add political stuff, that's even worse. But I'm not going to go political. I'm going to fly through this so we can get to sharing our experiences. So the first thing that we need to do is be aware. And the topic of my presentation, which is rooted engagement, has to do with this idea of knowing who you are, not only as an immigrant, not only as a human being, but as a professor. What is your role in the classroom? And the only way, guys, that this is going to be successful is by knowing and accepting and understanding who you are as an individual, as a professor, as a person. So B will be the constant of this presentation. So first of all, be aware. Be aware of yourself. Awareness is knowledge and understanding that something is happening or exists. We will always, and I'm talking about we, the people that come from another country, we will always have this accent, all right? That's a matter, that's a truth, and we're not gonna change it, even if we pay, like Sofia Vergara, thousands and thousands of dollars for, no, that's not gonna happen. We were born speaking a different language, so we need to accept that we will always have an accent. We have to also accept and focus and understand and realize that we speak differently, that we are different, that we behave differently because of those values that we were talking about. I can't stop using my hands. That's something that for another culture will be extravagant or even inappropriate. You know, it's not proper to use your hands. It's not proper to raise your voice. So it goes back to what Deborah was saying earlier. This confrontation, this dichotomy that we have between what we are and what we want to convey versus what the system is telling us how we need to be, how we need to behave. And in turn, and this is something that we have to pay attention to, is we pass that on. We perpetuate that onto the students. And what Deborah was saying, your English is not proper English. Your behavior is not proper behavior. And again, this is cultural. This is something that we have to face, that we have to deal with. So again, be aware of who you are, self-awareness, and you must embrace that. You have to be honest. You have to realize, okay, this is it. This is who I am. These are my values. This is the way I was raised, and I have to be. I have to be honest. Why? Because this is the best form of self-awareness, because it allows us to see ourselves in the most realistic way. I will never stop being like this. In my classroom, this is the way I am. I'm very loud. I'm very, how do you say, like when you use your hands a lot, Natalia, help me, or anybody else. This is who I am. And
expressive.
Expressive, yes. I have to be like this. I have to be honest with myself. I will never be that professor. I will never be like that professor. And that same way, I don't want my students to be like that student. So be honest, this is who you are, and it's not going to change. And then be yourself, because everyone else is already taken, as Oscar Wilde said. Be yourself, be in alignment with your values and traditions. Accept yourself. Let me tell you a short story, because I love storytelling, and I do this in my classes too. When I first left the Dominican order, the convent, as we call it in Spanish, I went to the University of North Texas, and I became an anthropologist, or I studied anthropology. But I did it from a very different, or with a different intention. I wanted to study the other, because I believe, or I thought, I thought that I was gringo. I had immersed myself in the North American culture so much that I started looking at my own culture from another perspective. And until I was honest to myself and realized that that's not who you are, I did not even enjoy learning about my own culture. That happened when I moved to FIU to study at the Latin American and Caribbean Center with the Cuban Research Institute. And I have to give a huge credit to Uva de Aragon, who actually, was was the person who taught me how to think in Cuban. So the moment I aligned myself with my values and traditions, the moment I embraced my roots, my Cuban roots, my Afro-Cuban roots, my Spanish Afro-Cuban roots, at that time, I started growing as an individual, and I started understanding and appreciating my culture so that I could actually study it and communicate within it. What I'm trying to say is, it's very difficult for you to communicate with students if you do not understand your own culture and then theirs. Because otherwise you will be doing this from a different platform. You will be doing this as a third party. You have to maintain that identity. Going back to my Texas self, I try to become somebody else. I try to erase my accent. I stop watching Spanish TV. I despise, everything that was Spanish, because it was third world, and it was backwards, and I was a Texan. All I needed was a cowboy hat. Talking about stereotypes. So we have to maintain our own identity, because then if you are secure on your identity, if you know that you are Latinx, or if you are Irish American, or if you are African American, if you, whatever you are, if you know that, if you embrace that, if you are okay with that, then whatever happens, you will always know who you are. And that is extremely important. That's a pillar. That's a pillar of stability, of emotional stability, of psychological stability, of cultural stability, in order for you to transmit that to your students. And then, if this thing works, you find your focus and your direction, and you take all of that you have learned, all of that you have embraced, and then you focus on whatever direction you are going to go. But you have to be true to yourself. We cannot be changing personalities, because then our classroom experience is going to be fake. We have to also communicate. When we're ourselves, we communicate how we are. Again, I could try to do this and be very proper, almost British, and I'm not making fun of the British, but I could be very, I can't. I already started using my hands, so it's going to look fake. And this is going to jump into my second part. Your students will know that. Your students will notice that. Your students will realize this guy or this lady is a fake. When you pretend to be something else or somebody else, your students will actually realize that, and you will lose momentum. My first class at Nassau Community College, and we do have other Latinos and Latinas in the faculty. Little, I mean, few, but we have some. We are working on it. I had a student who came to me and told me, that his dad was sick, that he had to work an extra job. I mean, he told me all his stories in broken Spanish, because he was born in Nassau. His parents are from El Salvador, and in Spanish he told me this. And then at the end, crying, he told me, and I want to thank you for letting me cry in Spanish. Cry in Spanish. That was something huge, because he understood that I was, even though he was born in the United States and he's from El Salvador, or his family is from El Salvador, and I was born in Cuba, we connected. So if you do not know who you are, if you do not hold your banner of your Latino identity high, you're going to lose that connection with the students, because your students actually are already in a huge, confusing culture. I have a video that I want to show you, and I'm not going to show the entire video because I want to leave time for later. Let me see if and then we'll go into cultural relativism. But let me just go back here, because this is something that our students go through. Let me see, copy link. Let me stop sharing. And it is actually a very intelligent student. You will have to forgive or overlook some of the bad words that he's going to use, but it is the way our most of our students actually communicate. But listen to what the student has to say, because he is a representation of the majority of our students. And if we don't understand this, if we don't relate to this, we are not going to communicate. We are not going to bridge the gap that we want to bridge in the classroom. So let me go back to my little thingy here. Share the screen. Where's my student? Well, he's not my student. I wish he were my student. Okay, so can you see it?
Yes.
All right. Lives matter. But Jeffrey, aren't you like Spanish or something? No, I'm not Spanish.
Let me just go to the beginning.
Black lives matter. But Jeffrey, aren't you like Spanish or something? No, I'm not Spanish. I speak Spanish. I'm pretty sure I've heard a white person speaking German before. And I'm pretty sure that didn't stop them from being white. I've heard an Asian person from the Philippines speaking Spanish. I'm pretty sure that did not stop them from being Asian. Spanish imperialism and Spanish speaking in America in general has really confused a lot of people about their racial background. Let me define a few things. You guys.
Hello? Oh,
Have some contextual understanding. Spanish means that you're from Spain or you're a citizen in Spain. Spanish is not a race.
Notice that this student is very clear for the most part in all of these categories that have been invented in the United States that they have to deal with just to understand who they are. So he's trying to explain this to other people of his own generation, but he at least has knowledge and awareness of this. Many of our students can't understand this. They are extremely confused. So we sometimes have to clarify that. And if we don't understand our own reality, we will not be able to understand theirs.
Hispanic means that you're from Latin America, reigning from the Spanish Peninsula. So the Spanish conquistadors that went to Puerto Rico and lived there and had children and had Spanish babies, they were considered Hispanic because they're of Hispanic origin. They're from Spain. But the native Taino Indians mixing with the Spaniards or some of the black slaves that were brought to Puerto Rico or Dominican Republic and any other Caribbean islands, those children coming to America are Latino, not Hispanic, because they're not Spaniard. They have mixed heritage, but they come from a Spanish-speaking country. It's not Spain, but they're Spanish-speaking because of the Spanish conquistadors that came and brought Spanish there. People think I'm Dominican because my dad is Dominican, or people think I'm Puerto Rican because my mom is Puerto Rican. That's not how it works. Saying you're Dominican is like...
And at least in New York, this is very, very common, that this multi-ethnic, multi-nationality background that makes them even more confused, not only to deal with their own identity, but to explain that to their peers that want to understand who they are.
Like saying you're American from the United States. Saying you're Dominican is like saying you're Canadian. Dominican is a nationality. Some New York Dominicans get offended when I say, no, I'm not Dominican, my dad is. They say, oh, well, you need to stay true to yourself. I am staying true to myself. I was born here in America, so my nationality is American. If I was at the airport in Dominican Republic and they had the line for Dominicans and tourists, I would have to go to tourists, because if I went on the Dominican line, that would be fucking fraud to tell them that I'm Dominican. To tell them I'm a Dominican citizen would be a lie. Technically speaking, yes, I'm multicultural. My family is made up of Dominican culture, Puerto Rican culture, black culture, but I am not a Dominican because I was born here. Get it? Hope that gives a little bit of understanding to some of the Latinos that were kind of confused on how to identify themselves. Once the US started saying Latino and Hispanic, it started confusing a lot of people. Latino or Hispanic is an ethnicity. An ethnicity involves culture and heritage, not just nationality. Just as an example, Dominican Republic is very diverse. You can have Asian Dominicans. There's plenty of Chinese people and Japanese people that come to the Dominican Republic. They have children there, and those children are Dominican citizens. It doesn't stop them from being Asian. The problem with Latinos is that we're very culturally focused. Some of the most culturally focused people in America. So we focus on things like Dominican pride, Mexican pride, Puerto Rican pride, and there's always that inner conflict between Latinos. Caribbean Latinos might have separate struggles like immigration laws, but our black ancestors making a pit stop in the Caribbean does not change the fact that we're black. Newsflash, black people, it doesn't make me any less black for speaking Spanish. Just like it doesn't make you any less black for not speaking African. So many Latinos, you ask them, what are you? And they might just say, oh, I'm Puerto Rican, I'm Dominican, I'm Mexican. But when you ask them what race they are, they'll either say something that isn't a race, or they'll just be confused as hell and act like they were never asked that question before. If you ask them what race they are, they might say Hispanic or Latino. But Hispanic or Latino is not a race. For the mere fact that you can be an Asian Latino, you can be a black Latino, or you can be a white Latino. Especially in the Caribbean islands, people tend to be more mixed race, multicultural, to be more multiracial or biracial. I'm a perfect example of this because my mom's side would be considered Asian and white because of Spaniards going to Puerto Rico, and we do have Taino Indians in our bloodline as well. Taino Indians are arguably black. Most people argue that they were black or Asian. Then again, if you go really far back, a lot of people argue that Asians were black, or that...
So I'm gonna stop that because then he goes into a lot of more details and then he gets a little bit confusing. But I'm using this as an example of how much our students have to deal with. In the case of Nassau Community College, we have even more difficulties with our students because we have a large number of Central Americans, people from El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, who have actually been dormant, if you want to call it, in Long Island, because many of them have no papers, because their parents have no papers. And so this is a very, this is a community that has lots of challenges. And we, as their professors, their teachers, we need to understand their reality. We need to understand that, and now moving into another concept, and I'm apologizing here because I deleted 2 slides in between that were already covered by Jorge yesterday. But we need to understand what makes Latin America, what makes the Caribbean. And I'm not gonna go into details, but we need to understand this, that each culture, regardless of us sharing this, you know, our lives in the United States, each one of our culture is different, and each one of our cultures has value, and not all Latin American or not all Caribbean cultures, even the Hispanic Caribbean, are the same. So we have to be aware of that, and we have to understand this concept that I have here in the screen, that, you know, cultural relativism, ethnocentrism, in which basically we are trying to understand and apply this concept that no culture is equal to other cultures, and no culture is less valuable than other cultures. So when we stand in front of the classroom, we don't go off or show off as if our culture is more important, or if that specific culture is more important, because that actually is going to create a wall between our students and ourselves. And the idea here is to communicate, to bridge that gap between the student and the professor in order to have a more successful learning experience. So when we are in the classroom, if we don't know, for example, that people in Central America, they might eat tortillas, but tacos is not their main food, is actually pupusas. And we need to understand who our students are. We need to understand what their background is, and do not make the mistake of saying, oh, the sombrero fits all of us. No, because in Cuba, we don't use sombreros, and we do is just for pictures. So do not stereotype, and understand that each culture is different. And again, this would have made a lot more sense if I would have had those slides here explaining our heritage, from Spain and Africa, but that was already covered by Duani, and I did not want to extend much because I want to leave time for our discussion. So accepting, understanding our identity, our heritage, is a great asset as an educator, because not only most of us, particularly in this environment, speak several languages, but we understand what being multicultural means. So we could communicate, we can understand our students. We can reach out and communicate better with our students. So understanding and embracing our students will facilitate the second part of my presentation, which is engagement. Engage with your student. Be a part of it. Sometimes, like Natalia and I know, sometimes our engagement is too much, because then we are teaching and then we are advising them, and then we become the member of their or the advisor for their club. But you do as much as you can by being a part of that community that you are trying to teach. Even things as simple as understanding what they mean when they say something. If we are not close to our students, we don't know what they are trying to say. So we need to be engaged in our community, within our student community, in order to understand their struggles, to understand their needs, and also to overcome all the obstacles that we have. Juan mentioned some of the institutional obstacles. We know them very well. I'm not going to start dwelling on how little we get paid, how little resources we have, how little understood we are. But we know that we do have obstacles, and we have systemic racism that we have to deal with, and we have professional limitations that we have to deal with. But believe me, I mean, unless we are stable, secure on who we are, and unless we are engaged in our classroom, in our community, we will not be able to overcome those obstacles. So I want to, let me just play this so I can, pardon me. Okay, so how do we engage? What do I mean by engagement? And by the way, this second part, the first part came from a class that I took on identity. The second part comes from a seminar that I went to about being an engaged professor. So what is engagement? It's an arrangement to meet or be present at a specified time or place. That's the general concept. Basically, being engaged means be there. And now we are back to that be that I have been mentioning from the beginning. So be there for the students, be there for the classroom, be actually present in your classroom. Don't be absent. Active participation in your classroom and being invested in what happens with your student. That is part of being engaged. Be active with them, literally, physically active. Move around the classroom, interact with them. If possible, just call, learn the student name, learn the student sport, and interact with the student. This engagement actually includes that the direct service that we have to do as professors, most of us, or that we choose, or we have chosen to do. It also implies being involved in your institution's plans, you know, because if you're not a part of it, they will never give you what you need. So it is a lot that we have to do, but this is the path that we have chosen in life. So we have to be engaged in this, because as we know, faculty engagement is linked to better student experience. This boils down to do not be boring. And believe me, guys, I did history. And when my students come to class, they go like, oh, history is so boring. And I always say, no, history is not boring. History professors are boring. So this is something that we need to do in our classroom. You know, this is something that we have to be in our classroom, which we call, or, you know, I got from this workshop that I went, be crazy. And yeah, it sounds crazy, it sounds funny, but it's actually it's something that will help you remember. So be crazy, be creative, but it's actually an acronym that we use. So the B is believe in yourself, in your traditions, in your values. Hold on, let me move this. Believe in your students' abilities and intentions. Believe in your vocation role and your role as a professor, and be available. If you are not available, no matter how many languages you speak, it doesn't matter how in tune you are with your background. It doesn't matter. You can be dressed with guayabera in the case of the Caribbean. If you are not available, the students are not going to reach out to you. And if they do, it will be a failure. Then the E, engage. Engage in your students' lives. Engage in, well, academic lives, if possible, a little bit on their family, because, you know, Latinos and we are very connected to our families, but be engaged in the community, engage in your institution, engage in your classroom, be active. Now, the C for crazy is care for the student. Know your student's identity. I said it before. Somebody from El Salvador they might speak Spanish like the person from Honduras, but they are not the same. If you have, like the comedian said earlier, you know, do not call a Mexican Cuban, do not call a Cuban Puerto Rican. Be aware of your student's identity. And if you don't know them, do not make it up. No, it's not one size fits all, and we could be offensive. We cannot teach our students if we do not understand them and respect their identity. Talk to the students, care for your students. What are their issues? embrace their issues and engage in solutions to the obstacles and the problems that they might have. This thing, okay, good. The art is when you are in the classroom, and this again goes back to what Juan was saying earlier, use real world examples in your class, particularly since this webinar is about business for Spanish speakers. Use actual examples, use relevant examples, apply your teaching, bring in a newspaper, even if it is, I don't know, history of marketing, or bring something contemporary and make it relevant to your students so they understand that they are not just there for the diploma, that they are learning practical things. Now, use actual experiences, use your own experiences. I use a lot of my experiences in my classroom, and I'm not, pretending to be better than my students. I just tell them, for example, all right, guys, I came to the United States when I was 25 years old. That was in 1994. So now you know how old I am. So I came in 1994. I could not speak a word of English. And I still managed to get a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD with a 4.0. So if I did it, you can do it. And it helps them because they see somebody with a similar background to theirs that has been able to achieve what he or she wanted to do. And a lot of us are on the same boat. A lot of us have the same kind of background, and we can use it in our classes. And if you don't have those experiences, if you don't understand, if you cannot share that path, bring somebody who has them. For example, my Latin American, I teach over, well, after I clear the air with the being Afro or not, when I teach my Afro-Caribbean class, I bring a friend of mine from FIU, okay, virtually, Stephanie Chauncey, because she specializes in Haitian art. And she talks to my students about Haitian identity, because I might understand Haiti from the historical perspective, but I do not have the Haitian experience. So when they see somebody, when they see a Haitian professor talking to them about Haiti, they can relate even more. When I talk about our Spanish traditions, I bring my friend Niurka Marquez, who teaches at the Honor College in FIU, who is a flamenco dancer. And she goes, so bring people that know, that have the experience. Use the resources that you have available. Your best resources, your friends. They will be happy to help you in the classroom, and it will make the class even better. And then the Z is for zeal. Have energy, have excitement for your teaching, for your students. Don't be boring. If you are boring, students will be bored. So it's have energies, and I don't know, drink coffee or just be a little bit more animated, because students will pick on that, and they will actually reflect your how animated you are in the class. Then the Y is you. You educate them, you create and make the difference. You are in charge of the classroom, but it is not about you, it's about them. So you have to balance out this idea that you are in charge, which is not about you. And bring yourself into the classroom to communicate better with the students so they can communicate better among themselves and in the future. So it is very, very involved or involving process in which you have to be a part of it, and you have to be, and I know that most of you aren't, I'm just probably preaching to the choir, but I want to make it even more clear. We have to be engaged, be active with our students, and whatever we are transmitted, they are going to take and then use themselves in the classroom, among themselves, and in the future. I'm going to stop there because I promised that I was going to stop soon, and I can talk a lot. I was, as Alberto said, I was trained back in Cuba and in Mexico to be a preacher, so I can preach. I can talk a lot. So leave it. Thank you all for listening, and thank you for inviting me. And I think that we are all learning so much. And again, we are here for the students, so let's make it for them.
Thank you, Leo. Thank you for this passionate talk.
That's cultural. People say, "Why are you angry?" I'm not angry. That's the way I am.
I am not sure if there are some questions. We also have Deborah here, I think. So probably if you have some questions for her, we can proceed then.
Yeah, we can do questions. We can actually share our own experiences, because that was my intent. My original intention was for us to share our frustrations and our ideas and our innovations. And so just be, oh, the chair of my department is coming. Be free of sharing whatever you want to share, even if it is frustrating, if comments, whatever. Let's make this our forum so we can, take it back to the students.
Okay. Denise has a comment.
Beautiful presentation. So I teach a course on the Afro-Latin American experience here at Morehouse. It's a course that's meant for first-year students. It's in translation, and it introduces them to the linguistic cultural artifacts written or produced by artists of African descent in Latin America. And we usually have 4 modules. We rotate them. It'll be like Brazil, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Bolivia, Brazil. And one of the things I've noticed different in teaching this course than when I've taught my language courses is the need or the feeling of establishing co-authority. In the language classes, it's very easy to establish authority. I just start speaking Spanish or I start speaking Portuguese, and immediately I'm known as the main figure, right, of learning there. But within a class that's focused on Afro-Latin America, all of a sudden I have to, for however self-aware I am of my own identity, be it multicultural, multiracial, I have to recognize the limits of perception that my students have and how they will initially perceive a professor whom they will not see as Black, teaching them this material. And so then there, I have to establish also that the onus is on them. Like, I can facilitate the material, right? I can make sure that you have access to Juan Francisco Manzano, or that, Carolina Maria de Jesus. But at some point, I have to say, I cannot relate to the same experience of Blackness that you yourself have a firsthand account of. And so when I put it in those terms, it becomes a very dynamic classroom. It becomes a very shared environment, and it opens them up to participate even more, because they know that they are also the producers of knowledge. And it's been a beautiful experience, and at the same time very revealing for me in terms of how they self-identify, how things like nationality, for example, a lot of them put African American. They do not identify as American because they see it as a separate thing. And that's been one of the more rewarding things for me, and completely agree with you on just establishing that level of engagement. It's so important. And at the same time, it's made me more aware of even our institutional limitations, in the sense of, here I am teaching in a modern foreign languages department, but we offer, Spanish, Portuguese, German, languages of empire. And here we are at an HBC, we don't offer any of the other African languages. And so it makes me have to define also, well, what is the access point? Yes, this is a language of empire, but it's also a language of resistance, right? That has seen the development and inclusion of that African heritage. So thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to share that co-authority has been very meaningful in my classes.
I think that we have to be, be aware of, and it's a cliche, but we can't change the past. These are the languages that we speak here. This is our culture. And that's what I was talking about, embracing our culture. This is our culture. Our language is Spanish. Malo, bueno, is Spanish. Portuguese, malo, bueno, Portuguese. So we have to depart from that reality, that we have to embrace our past. We can change it. We don't speak African languages in our nations. We can cherish them and we can preserve them as part of our heritage, but it would be difficult to communicate because not everybody speaks an African language. So I understand completely your frustration, but also your ability, that frustration actually pushes you to be more engaged. You know, you give the student leverage. And something that I actually have done in my classes very successfully, and I try to do that, you know, with my colleagues and my friends and my family, is this idea of calling the United States America. It is the United States. America is the entire continent. And when we use America, we all do it, okay? When we use America to refer to the United States, we're actually robbing our students of part of their identity. So it's something that has to start with us, you know. It's like, yeah, I know it's very difficult sometimes we do it, but again, it's being aware in the classroom of who we are, where we are going, and then it will really help us with our students. And that, I mean, that sharing, you know, the power in the classroom is very, very important. You empower the students.
Sure. Any other question?
I think Rhonda has a...
Not more of a question, but more of a comment. I'm an EAP instructor at Broward College, and I find that incorporating their culture and their life, infusing it in the curriculum and highlighting it, and in areas of where there's shortage, utilize that as a means to research. So if there's no African language that is used on the campus, incorporate it in the course and have students research different languages and get the origin of it and do it as classroom presentation. So wherever there is a void that I can't find within the curriculum, I make it as part of my course content. And that was just an observation, just a comment that I was sharing. But great presentation. I'm enjoying this so much.
But it's great, Rhonda, you're saying that, because sometimes something as simple as this, for example, when I try to explain to my students the Colombian exchange, which is, you know, the transfer of cultures and peoples between the old and the new world, blah, 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 blah. You know what I do when I can, if I'm not hungry and eat it, I bring a Cuban sandwich and a taco to the classroom. And I show them the Cuban sandwich has bread, ham, cheese. All right, that's European. The taco has tortilla and beans. That's American, meaning from the Americas. Sometimes something as simple as that, or something as bringing somebody in on campus that speaks an African language. You know, like Kwame, he's been in our sessions 2 times already. You know, bringing them in. Listen to how that person speaks. You know, use the resources that we have available. And again, our colleagues are great resources. They will be glad to help you. If we cannot pay them, well, invite them to dinner. If we can pay them, great. So yes, just be creative, be crazy. This idea of the Einstein, you know, that's me in the classroom. You know, I have a lot of artifacts that I bring from Latin America, and it helps communicate. And when the students see communication between the professor and them, they feel, most of them, they feel more comfortable to communicate with themselves, and in the future it will help them.
I have something to say. I don't know if we have time.
Yeah, go ahead, Luciana.
Oh yes, I'm sorry that my image is not here because I'm arriving to encounter Dr. Watson at FIU. But I was enjoying all the way here your presentation. I remember also the presentation on your dissertation about the Inquisition, and I loved it, and we discussed afterwards. And also your passion as a preacher is visible and is very effective. I think I will imitate some of these because we all have the passion. We have to channel that passion that we have. And I wanted to comment an experience that I have that might contribute to all these experiences. That is in the content, how to describe yourself as a student and how you describe others. And this was the most challenging part in the courses I teach. I currently teach at FIU of Spanish 1 and Spanish 2, because sometimes the African American students, they say, yo tengo el pelo moreno, yo tengo los ojos morenos, yo soy todo moreno. And in Spanish, we have subtle differences to talk about how brown are your eyes or how curly is your hair. So I was trying to emphasize how important it is to know how to describe yourself and others is a matter of identity too. And in this case, I wonder that if I talk about how I conceive myself as a professor, I describe them my self-awareness identification, and I brought a picture of my grandparents who immigrated from Syria to Venezuela. And I described my parents and grandparents who also had curly hair, brown skin, and all this, but in Spanish. And they enjoyed it and laughed a lot, and they start talking about their own grandparents and how did they look. And I encouraged them to bring black and white pictures and share with others. And it was very, very beautiful. I also did an exercise with them to write a letter to grandma or grandpa. And most of the grandpas were elsewhere, or Haiti, or El Salvador, and they were reading out loud the letters. And some of them start crying because it's very, very, some of the grandparents, they haven't seen them in 10 years or more. So it was a very, very emotional experience that rewarding for us. And also the Black History Month, and you as a historian, you also enjoy these kind of experiences, because I found a documentary about stories of success of African Americans in Florida. And I put the documentary, but without the audio, because the audio was in English. And I was explaining with with the vocabulary adapted to them what was in the video, and also about Martin Luther King, for example, and comparing Martin Luther King with Rigoberta Menchú, for example, in two contexts and two historical periods, but they found a match, no? And it helped a lot.
I think that,
and for example, with, yes, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, finish. I was going to say something.
Just when Obama was in the presidency, you say, okay, mention a famous character, everybody was talking about Obama a lot. And one student one African-American student, she said, I love him in Spanish, no? Because he has so much color. And it was so beautiful in Spanish, no? He used to say, yo lo amo porque tiene mucho color, como yo. And it was very, very changing, because no matter his political orientation, it was a positive approach to a historical figure, no matter the political views. That's all. I'm sorry if I spoke too much.
No. That's the way we are. We cannot just be concise and, but what I was going to say is sometimes you also have to give the students that power to be him or herself. I had a student at the other university where I was teaching that she came to me at the end of the class, and in a very, very difficult English, she told me that she will not participate verbally in the class because she had issues with the language. She was from Brazil. She was a lawyer, and that woman wrote like a professional lawyer, but she could not. She was embarrassed of speaking in public in the beginning, because when I started encouraging them and told them, like, I also have an accent. Can you hear my accent? Sometimes there are words that I cannot even say, and I have to change it. Like, the place where you go swimming, I have a problem. Bish, so I don't say a bad word. So by the middle of the semester, she was already participating, because she could see that the professor also had challenges. So if they can see our humanity, our struggles, without becoming too vulnerable, because then they will take advantage of it, then you will actually, they will participate. They will break that ice. They will just feel empowered, which is what you all were saying.
Well, we are beyond the allowed time. I am not sure if someone want to comment something else, or any other questions. If not, we will grab it for today. And tomorrow we will continue discussing this and other issues. Okay, so see you all tomorrow, guys. Thank you for everything. And Leo, Amazing.
Thank you all. Thank you for sharing and listening to me, that I talk a lot.
No. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow. Oh, Rhonda, I saw your message, and yeah, we can share the recording. Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.